Alright, so we're going to look at a couple of lesson examples, and then we're going to look at one of David Lewis Maroney's students. So you may not be able to see the TrackMan data exactly, but we'll look at the lower blue. This is a student, a full-time student. Basically when the full-time program started, so last year when she left here, her club head speed was 94. And so this is the start of her second year, so it dropped to 83. The deliveries were good, up on a 3, into out, all of that was fine, but there wasn't enough speed. The ball speed was very low, 122. So that was alarming, right? So basically starting off...
She was at 94 and dropped back to 84,
Yes.
basically, dropped 10 over the...
So the thing is, you look at some students and their predisposition is to be just lollygaggy, right? They just, they lack a bit of that. You know, you throw a ball at them and they just drop it. And you have to rev the engine back up again. So we're just going to look at some examples here. This is an extended version of the flow drill. You know, you look at Dr. Kwani, does a lot of this stuff. Obviously, you know, a lot of footwork. But I like sometimes where a student doesn't feel the speed in the head, I like to do an extended flow drill. So it's sort of borrowing the concept of a gentle flow that might be, say, 6, 8 inches in front of left foot, extending it forward. So it gets the core engaged, gets the upper body engaged, but what we want to feel here is fast head back and even faster through. So you're sort of getting physical literacy going, but really accentuating the speed in the outside. So it's left, right, left. So we're going to start left, and she's absolutely going to rip the club head back. All right, so she starts to feel overspeed going back. So it makes a really good coil. And for somebody that throws, you know, so you can see going back there, she has sort of a late set, which gives us lots of early lag in the downswing, which for somebody that's a thrower, at the best of times is good for this young lady. So that translation, that if we let this play regular speed, let's see here. And this is her first interpretation of it. So I'm screaming at her, I said, okay, give me just absolutely, you know, your long drive max. So you can see the speed start to go up. All right, barely. But watch this here. So that was the beginnings of that. So we're into what, 2 months later? And if we look at the TrackMan data, let's see here. It's pretty impressive. So this was a week ago, this past Saturday. So let's see here. Isa. Let's see. Isa. She was in my batch here. Here we go. So we see up here, so club head speed went from 83 up to 92. We kept the attack angle nice and high, kept the delivery into out, and the ball speed jumped to 134. And then the carry went from 173 up to 223. And she actually hit a couple beyond that. She hit one 256, got up to 94. So that's basically, you know, a month and a half of just back, but really reiterating the theme, feeling the speed in the outside. So her pivot drill is something we did constantly, but there was no speed in the outside. So I like the extended flow drill for that.
How long her doing that drill do you think we started to see some effect?
I would sort of agree with those guys that, you know, I mean, we saw it immediately in this session. I got that 83 up to about an 87.
Yeah.
But just like the super speed stick guys, when they give you some feedback, it's about 3 weeks before you start to see things really maintained. So her speeds right now, I haven't seen anything less than a 90 over the last 2 weeks. So that's encouraging for a girl that tends to be a little bit on the...
Do you think, I've had a similar situation where I've worked with girls to try to get them up to speed up.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I kind of worked out over the years was that you get the speed up, and then you during the season, or in this case it was the summer, wasn't it? They get it up, and then end up at the end of the season where they started. And one of the things I worked out was that a lot of them then, let's say their 7-9 distance is 135 or something. They can actually now get an 8-iron at the same distance, but they don't. They still choose the same club, right? So they go out the first tournament, then they've spent some time working it out. They still choose the club that they choose the year before. So over the season, they sort of just work their way back into where they were. So getting them to change what I realized, getting them to actually change club was a big part of them retaining the speed, and then maybe the following winter getting them to go up again and go up again, keep climbing the ladder rather than dropping down. You got to change club.
Yeah, I mean, some players we work with right away have just easy speed, right? They just got it. They can step on it. I saw some of the kids this year when I did TrackMan out there, and I saw them a few weeks ago, and they were hitting. I mean, their speeds jumped, especially the boys, because they almost want to chase the high number. Whereas the girls, and actually to your point, so she played. This is 2 days before the USGA 4-ball qualifier, right? And her sister told me in the event she didn't commit to the speed because she felt like, and actually she hits it straight.
Yeah.
So I said to her, okay, you got to buy into this. So there is a buy-in there. They almost feel like they're out of control a little bit, right? And you just got to stay with it. So I think the stay with itness, if you recognize that the player is centric to that, you've got to incorporate it 2-3 times a week.
They've got to go out and practice runs too. And then if it was a 7 before, take an 8.
Yeah.
And even if they feel like it's not enough, just stick with it for a few games, and then it's sort of they start to mentally realize that they can do it, and it sticks.
And make sure they do their non-ball striking stuff, in this hitting day here, without a ball, just absolutely, unhinging the speed in the club head. All right, so that's a junior. Big increase in speed there with an extended flow drill. Let's take a look at, let's go here and look at a college player here. This is more geometry with planes and paths. So this is a young lady, plays for Florida Southern. Her dad's a well-recognized PGA of America player, PGA of America pro up in Michigan. So Elizabeth tends to get, Elizabeth came in this past weekend, so the energy on the ball strike was down, the curvature tended to be sort of low and cutty or low and pulley. So her tendency in the past would be, okay, she'd left motion around her right side and then her left arm plane would immediately work out. So, and coupled with that, her grip had slipped to a weak position there. So you see the V on the right hand very much almost in like an ideal chipping position. So that V is for me too much up toward her sternum. Left hand, a bit of the cylinder showing. So her left hand was a little palmy, right hand too far on top. And then you add that up and you can see sort of reverting back to her tendencies here. All right, so as we look at it here, so weak grip, we want to move both hands more to her right as she looks down. And so as we work it back here, backswing lines weren't too bad. I wasn't overly disappointed with the depth of her coil, but for me I would have liked to have seen the handle there. Would have liked to have seen the handle a little bit deeper, a little bit more toward her right heel there. So I did go after the pivot a little bit, but you can see her old tendency revert. So a little bit of lift, and then a little lack of depth, and you can see as she transitions, you can see where the left arm shifts. It goes out too much, and then she has to slide to sort of rescue it back on plane. And then ultimately, the handle's not high enough there for me, and the exit's too low left, which was pretty much what our ball flight was telling us, right? So everything was low left, and some cutting of the face was a little open to the path. So as we look at some of the reminders here, a couple of things from the face on as we look at it too. Stance was too narrow for me. Her inseam is like 34, 35. So her hips are very high off the ground, so I wanted a wider base with the irons as well as the driver. I wanted a little bit more, I wanted the ball more forward in the stance, a little bit more tuck of the right side under the left with the driver as well. Because her driver was too low and it was only, I think, apexing like 45 feet. So she was a little too much down on the driver. And so you can see how much the left arm shoots out toward the camera there. So we obviously know the player in this case, we know the tendency, so we can sort of cut right to the chase once we measure it. So I just wanted to recreate some depth in her right side. Anytime she creates that depth going back, good things happen. It can get the arm plane deeper, the left arm can stay across her chest. Nice tuck of the hips, chest to the sky. Then we marry that up with some palm push drills. So we step in, we get her to make that shift, but then squash the left arm a little bit more across the upper torso. You can see the exit now has a little bit more sling out to the right. So sort of marrying up, so going from pivot to palm push. And we post this obviously on our coach now, so she could sort of see how she stored the energy, kept the left arm a lot more in. All right, so really good exit there. And then we gave her a feel for impact. I want us to see the hips gently open, handle a little higher, and I want us to see the chest a little bit more square, so the exit definitively felt like it was going to go out to right field.
Where did you get one of those 360 cameras from? That was pretty good.
Isn't that pretty good? So, look, a lot of times when David sees a student like this and we have their notes, you're going to see things that reoccur, right? She will go back to being left-sided, not really very opened up in her right side. Her left arm's going to go out and she's just going to slide and drag it across her. So once you know the student, you want to just reiterate, maybe come up with a new drill or two just to change it up. But you can see here, just again, now we've attached the club to the situation, but we also did some practice swings without a ball there. Let me see if I have one here. No, just with the ball. So you can see here right away, we gave her a little constraint to swing away from. So nice, better depth with her coil. You can see her left arm's less lifty. The grip change was huge, the face a lot more neutral. And then she shifted and shallow, so you can see the left arm stayed more across the chest. Club head shallow, just gently behind the hands. You can see the exit a lot less across her torso, just a lot more centrifugal force through the exit there. Really, really good. She responded very well to it. So sort of before and after. You can see how much lift there was. Left arm goes out, a bit more depth on the left arm stays in. Good depth to the right hip, right shoulder. And you can see not pulling the handle so much across her. All right. And let's have a look here. And then with the driver, you can see what a noticeable difference with the driver. The ball position to her felt way, way too far forward. Felt like her right side was too tucked under. I just said, okay, let's coil and shift and exit right. And right away, the ball flight jumped. You can see the torque into her left heel was accentuated there. And then when we look at the numbers, pretty dramatic here. Let's have a look. Miss Elizabeth. Actually, let's have a look in her coach notes. It's easier to see. All right, so you can see here. What's neat with the driver is, check this out. Look, with the driver, we really didn't change the club head speed, but the delivery's changed a lot. Down on it, so now she's up on it. So 3.5 degrees of change in attack angle. The club start traveling out more to the right. Swing direction, huge. The ball speed, but look at the way the ball stayed up in the air longer here. So we went from, where do we go here on cover? So we went 216, 23, we went 55, 56 feet in the air, 271. So just a better ball flight all around, had less of that pull cut look to it, stayed in the air longer. It was just a much better ball flight. The height was up. And then the iron was dramatic, so you can see the iron 81, started at 79, down on a little bit too much here, a little bit too much left, and everything swing direction, path and face. Ball speed jumped, all right, 10 miles an hour ball speed, all right, smash went up, and then she normally hits at 155. You can see when she came, she was miss hitting everything at 130, so a huge regain in. So yeah, very noticeable. So in geometry, sometimes you get the geometry right with the pivot. The two really collaborate well. So it's just polishing the pivot, a bit of depth, and then really feel the exit there. So that was amazing because she's basically stalling out and wiping across it. So it's a glancing blow when you've got to be careful. I think players with speed, you can get the shaft planing more with their irons if they've got the speed. They can be pullers and pull it back in. You look at a Nick Price, you look at some of the Korean girls, amazing the way they plane it back there, but you better have enough speed and strength to do that. I think for most of them who have a little bit more swing, they need a little bit of that sling where it goes, the momentum of the club's going away from the torque of the body. So for her, that's a good blend for her. Any questions on that one?
No questions.
All right.
My great one. My takeaway there for me is, everybody will have their own takeaways, but one, just how much time you're taking to give them start to finish, when they go away and they get themselves in trouble and they go through the journey we've taken them through. For me as well, when you sort of get to the point, kind of,
Yeah,
you
so,
got to the point of what you wanted to happen, an impact pretty quickly, like you get yourself caught up
yeah.
in the cause and effect a little too much sometimes, right? You just went
Yeah.
after it.
Well, sometimes it's nice because you'd rather have the old problem be the new problem, because if it's a different problem every time, it's like you can be all over the place. I feel like every lesson is a new lesson, and you're 5 lessons in and you've done 25 different things.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you know, the old DNA is easier to fix. You might have to be creative in how you come up with it. Alright, so let's have a look at a Canadian tour player here. So it came in after the winter. You know, they obviously had a long winter up there, fields and what have you, but energies were way down. So this young man from JJ Reagan, 6-iron here at 88 miles an hour. You can see he's only covering it for, you know, a tour player, at least on the Canadian tour, 180. He is a fader of the ball generally, so we're not surprised that we're seeing everything have a little left bias, a little bit more down on it. And then look at the driver beforehand. And this is a guy that's about 6'2", and he's very strong. I think you guys might have been around.
Yeah.
So really strong athlete, very strong internally, big engine. His driver is like 108. So ball speed's way down. Normally he's well up into the low mid-70s. So I was very concerned with the energy. He said he was hanging around between 2 under to even par, but he felt he was just chipping it around and playing defense golf. Don't hit it too far into trouble, but he wasn't able to open things up and hit carries on courses that he knows he was much more capable of. So this for me was, this is a big, I would say, something that I've picked up over the years, whether it's some of the biofeedback. I know Ben Shear's big on this, right? So this right hip for me is huge here. So what we did was we centered everything around opening this hip up quite a bit more. So if you look at where he started here, I felt without overly analyzing it, for me his hip turn there was way too small there on the left. Not nearly enough opened up through his right hip. Therefore the depth wasn't very good. He sort of pulled it across him. You can see everything's just very static, and you know, pull it across the ball, hit that little trap fade, which really good players will do. They'll just trap the ball. So he, as I say, really lost a lot of distance here. So look at the difference. Look at the difference in the hip turn on the right versus the left. Look at the handle depth. And so we really opened up his right hip turn there. And that was really the theme of the lesson. The other thing you'll notice is, we'll see from the face on, his coil was a lot better. To me, he was almost reversing a little bit because he was so, you know, he was a little bit too slidey, not opened up. So this for him was a big difference in feel there. Almost afraid to open it up. So sometimes you got to just put your hands on the student and really encourage it. So I said to him, you just be the upper body, hands and arms, I'll be the hips. So you can see really opening up his right glute, right hip, getting into his right heel. So I think that's very important as instructors. Sometimes, whether you use a teaching aid or something, you just have to put your hands on their shoulders or hips to give them a feel. So I did that a few times, and then I just had him, you know, go ahead and hit a few. So you can see the base, we widen the base. Again, I think for big frame shoulders, players, high hips especially, like Elizabeth, you got to get the stance wider, because otherwise their center of gravity is way too far off the ground. So you can see there, it's very sort of almost a feet together like backswing, isn't it? Just lacks that coil around the pivot, you know, sort of pushes into the ground and then just pulls the handle across, you know, just to save it. So here you can see there's a lot more wind up there. You can see he's using his upper torso a lot more, maxing out the coil. I like the right leg extending, the right hip going back. So really huge difference there. You can see I've just put the illustrations just to show him that I felt that load into his right side was a lot better. A ton more speed at the bottom. So left side is important when you do get them moving off the ball a little bit more, to make sure left side, left knee, left hip, left shoulder do work down, so we keep the side bend intact. But look at the torque into his left heel. Look, you couldn't believe, you know, how much speed you could get from that deeper position. So
that one on the left shoulder still over his left foot, isn't it? It's a tough position.
And let's see here with the driver, same thing. You can see I got the ball position. The driver was similar problem there. Oops, we lost.
Just close it. It's top there. It's
What's-
just, you're going to analyse it, just close it on top left.
Okay, hit it now. There we go. So this pivot drill is a good one for a player like this, because the right hand is going to give them feedback. The right hand's going to go up and behind onto their glute. Left side goes down and across. Then you can shift, push back into the ground with a little athleticism there. So I like this one as a pivot drill. I felt like you could feel his right side extend up and back and behind him while his left side stayed down and across. So you can see here the translation into the move with the driver, much more powerful. You can see he's a really strong athlete, but he really lacked, the base was so narrow and he didn't have a platform from which to really load up, so it's a much stronger look at the top. And then look, the ball data gives it all away there. So this is actually, that was a 6 iron. This is a 7 iron here. Let's see, this is a 7 iron after at 94 miles an hour. So the 6 iron was at 88 at the start, opened his coil up, his right side, got a 7 iron up to 94. You can see the ball speed was higher with the 7, and he hit at 190 with the 7. I mean, amazing. I mean, he was flushing. I mean, his deviation off the target line was very minimal. And then we did the same thing as you just saw with the driver, wider base, deeper right side coil. So all of a sudden 108 jumped to 115, obviously hitting up on it, a bushel there, but look at the ball speed jump. Kept the integrity of the spin, but look at the jump in height. So the cover went 301 up from 272 and he finished at 320. I mean, this guy in the past has played really well, but he's been fearless, and he got kind of timid with his pivot and sort of chipping it around the golf course. And I was like, hey, what's the point? You may as well just take out your 3-wood at that point, right? So you're giving up, and they play the same courses up there, obviously, on the Canadian Tour, so he knows areas that he used to be able to cover, and he wasn't challenging those lines, so I just felt, okay, as long as the strike remains the same, let's improve the head speed, the ball speed, and I like it. So, and we actually did these numbers. This was with his Titleist head, and this was with the Maverick. So I do give Tom some credit because we got the Maverick, got the spin, kept the spin down, kept the launch and height up. 15 is nice with that low spin. I mean, if you can launch at 15 and spin at 21 and find the fairway, covering at 3, right? We'll take that all day long. Any questions on?
With his original driver,
Uh-huh.
it was club path was positive. Was he just aiming way right? Because obviously his tendency was drag left with his iron,
Yes.
but then with his original driver it should be going more left, it was going right. So what was he doing different?
So with that's a good one. So he would actually slide a little bit more here.
Okay.
And he sort of was, he zeroed out there, isn't he, at 0.6, so he's neither one or the other.
Yeah.
And his identity is as he loves the feeling of his chest bone covering. But I said the problem with that is, I said you're not loaded up enough to cover, and so it's just a little handle pulled down. And when he did it with the drive, he sort of added in a touch of slide,
Okay.
which put the head kind of in that neutral on the hand line.
The attack angle changing so much has altered the path too, hasn't it?
Yes.
He's hitting up on it so much more, it's shifted the path a bit more to the left.
And sometimes when you do change that much in the setup and you do get the pivot that out, you might get a number that pops, like, do we want him hitting up on at 7 degrees? Well, in the past he's hit up on when he's played his best 3 or 4 and still hit a fade. So that may calm down a little bit, but I was pretty impressed with the line. It was very tight, so I didn't really want to overly take a number and say, we can't have this number associated with this good ball flight. I said, don't let that sit. So I really showed him what he needed to see there, and the strike and the height was pretty much the telltale.
Good.
All right, so bit of geometry, bit of speed in the head, and then also, for me, you see a lot of regular golfers, if you watch this hit, you look at players in the history of the game, you go back to Bobby Jones, you look at Nicklaus, You look at Watson, you look at players in the 70s, you know, there's a reason they had a long career. I think this is huge for longevity in terms of the player's pivot. You know, there was a time there where you get some players that have tremendous flexibility and they can, but you've got to be careful with that because it's like sometimes you see so much body torque and sting if they're not, you know, and things can get out of whack there. So I would say, you know, if a player is that way centric, they're not deep enough here and they're a little bit skinny there, sometimes you can just focus on the right hip, open it up. That was one of the things David and I worked with Trevor Immelman at the Masters, so he was very, when he came to us, he was very static and bowy here, so he actually got more opened up, a little bit more cup, and he felt he had more time to hit a draw while he still knew how to cover a fade. So I think that move there with the hip is like gives them time to create the feel and the position they want coming down. If it's very restricted and they've got a lot of spin in them, got a lot of rotation, that can be a tough spot for a young player that has that athleticism, or for an amateur that's struggling over the top, right? So a lot of times when you see that hip open up, you can do a few more things from that position, I think, than being so restricted.
It's a bit of a confidence thing as well to open up and for a regular golfer feel like they're getting this right set away from the ball. As it sometimes they want to stay on top of it, and
Yeah, that's why this
safer, isn't it?
That's why this is key here, because we don't want to obviously to open up and be,
Yeah.
you know, so out of our posture there. But this one here is a good one. Obviously, you can do some stuff with the bands under the wing, but that right hip for me, I've had a lot of success with that with players to open up pathways that they haven't opened, and it gives you a lot more playability in the downswing. You know, you can sync things up a lot more there. So that the amount of hip rotation for your players, especially that right hip, how much this opens up that's a big number. At least in the students I've worked with and the feedback I've gotten from some of these biomechanists. So that seems to be a big target. Any questions on that?
When you were cueing them, were you cueing them to just open up, or were you talking to them about how to keep like the inclination of the pelvis so that it actually was working up and back and not flat, or did you do that by extending the right leg?
Very good. So I did 3 and 3. So I did 3 behind him.
Yeah.
So I did 3 where right hip up and back 3 times, but when he went to hit it, I said, go to that feel, that pivot feel.
Yeah.
So I would verbalize that. That's a good point. So I was back, I said, come on, up and back
Yeah.
3 times. And then I said, when you hit it, just go to that feeling to pivot. So, you know, again, you could break that down from if they weren't achieving it when they hit it, but he got it right away.
Yeah, he's enough.
So,
That's good.
all right.
If we got it in there too.
You ready?
Airdrop first thing, or you want
No,
to
just
take
put
off?
it on there.
Yeah. Thanks, Sean.
Yep.
That's great. Who's the student did it?
I'm going to give you William. And William Marshall.
And then you guys put out no, but playing. How's he playing?
Not good.
Okay.
I mean, it's an interesting one. You know, he's been playing for a decent amount of time. You know, he came to us without any, so it's just not connecting. Is yours? Have you taken yours off?
Yes.
It has.
Yes.
Oh, unable to connect the big stroke.
Yeah, I'm not mirroring.
So William's a junior here at the academy. Yeah.
So, as I said, Williams come to us, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what's gone on, should we say. So he came to us without a junior golf scoreboard, so it's hard to sort of get a good picture of how he's been playing. Obviously just having chats with himself, and then obviously with his parents as well. He's played a lot of high school stuff, which is just 9 holes. Yeah, so, but very much, he shoots high 60s, low 70s, and etc. But obviously now that we've got some tournaments in junior golf scoreboard, what we're seeing is obviously that those numbers don't add up. So obviously a recent event, took him to, well, he's played 2 tournaments so far. He played at Eagle Creek, shot 88-80 on basically the easiest golf course in Orlando. And then we took him to Mexico and shot 98 and then at 86, I think it was. So, obviously a big lad, plenty of power. He can get it up to, so when we did the TrackMan with Sean there, he got it up in this assessment, got it up to 125 basically with the driver speed. You know, there's a lot of, the thing with William, everything looks pretty nice, not too bad, but obviously there's a massive stall in the body motion through impact, which then, because his body stays so square to the target, obviously he has a lot of hand action at the bottom, the left wrist breaks down, and the biggest thing I like to work out with William is a go-to shot, because currently at the moment he stands on any tee box and he's got basically no idea where it's going to go. So I've got to say,
Does his hand actually come off the club in the backswing?
come off. I haven't noticed it, but it does.
Down lags quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. Obviously it gets a bit steep, obviously coming down into it. So the initial things that were done, obviously got David to have a look at it as well. Because obviously he's a new student, so David had a look. David at the start originally got him to get more closed in the stance, and the whole thing was about more connection on the left side and getting his right side to rotate really hard around his left side. So we did a lot of boomerang underneath the left arm and throwing a frisbee with his left hand. But then the effect with that was he got like so steep, it got even steeper coming down, and yeah, I just got it going way left. So, and my ultimate goal is, as I said, I need something at the moment to give him some cues to stabilise that face and get him to at least be able to hit something out on the golf course. The only way he's doing it at the moment is reducing the speed to like 60%, and that way we can start to get some idea of where it's going, but it's still, obviously he's losing a lot of speed and a lot of distance, which is one of his obviously.
When he plays his Dave, when he plays his chippy shot out there at the moment at 60%, what does he favour? Just kind of a little pull cut, or
It tends to pull. Yeah. His bad shot, he just is very much a pull shot. So again, you know, obviously his body stops. You can see that the club just overtakes a lot. The left wrist breaks down, the face will close over a lot. You can see it obviously through there, and you know, so we went closed originally with his stance, and then when David had a look last week, he went open. He said, "No, I want to get him stance open now."
The goal with the frisbee was to change the release pattern, right? When he changed his release pattern, could he hit his push fade, or like,
Push fade.
could he ever just get the ball to push, or it was always either pull hook or pull draw?
Yeah.
He's never hit push, right?
No.
And if he tries to see the ball start right, does he change anything, or?
I haven't like put out a stick and asked him to hit push. I mean, to be honest, I've gone since we did the connection stuff. I went to right. The go-to shot's going to be a take the ball low and hit it.
Of course.
Punch out fade. But as I said, it just hasn't gelled at the moment. So it's sort of like, okay, well, let's get your guys' opinion on.
I mean, I suppose everybody will probably have their first initial thoughts, and maybe it's a good way here is just what is everybody's first initial thoughts? They might all be different,
Yeah.
but let's say there's a common trend, you know, don't copy each other, but
Yeah, so I think as instructors, we're always going to have that listening interview time with the student, and we're watching, whether it's on the range and or on the golf course, collecting some data. So when we look at, for me, when I look at the instability or the lack of ability for him to control the ball flight, and then we start to do our detective work. So if you go back to impact here, which you've sort of alluded to, all right, so we start at impact, we can see there's sort of an issue here, as you say, there's a stall out, particularly with the upper body. While he's a really strong athlete, he creates great pressure into the ground, albeit his hands have to save the day. So we look at that impact position, as you say, he's closed, You know, there's some breakdown in the arm formation here. Let's go down the line. And so now as we look at impact from this position, obviously we're going to see exactly what we talked about. So for somebody like him to hit it, it's going to be tough for him to hit a cover pull cut from that position, just nigh on impossible. All right, and then, so when we look at this, we'd say, well, the handle's very high, his chest is closed, lead arm is way too above, you know, his trail arm. But if we go to address position, go ahead and go to address. All right, so now if we draw our plane line, I'll just leave the club there. Go ahead and go to impact. All right, so there's no way you can play consistently with the handle raising that high. But now, make it away with it with a driver, right? So now we've got to ask ourselves, well, what are the simple reasons he gets there? Go back to address. All right, go ahead. So there we are at address, go to impact. All right, so now we've got to tidy that impact up. His body's got to be able to clear better. We can't have him that closed. If we go to address as well, go ahead and go back to address. All right, look where his butt is here. Now go to impact. Go ahead. All right, so everything's going into the ball. Difficult place to play from. Anytime the arm plane goes that much toward the ball target line along with the pelvis, it's going to be very, very difficult. So if we think in simple terms here, go ahead and start at the address position. I would say in real terms, if we look at his body type here, because he's so broad across the shoulders, thick through his upper torso, really strong glutes, for me, he's already out of position right from the get-go. So his tailbone, back of his glutes are way too far behind his heels.
Yeah.
And because his center of gravity is fairly low to the ground, even though because he's so thick, I would definitely start with the posture drill there, guys, where he's straight up and he hinges and creates space in front of him. So his arm segment's got to hang with more spacing. So he can actually now, from here, he can actually have room to shallow it coming down and still open up. All right, so he's actually in his own way here.
Yeah.
So for me, for somebody that barrel-chested, to have their arms and hands that close to them, and their glutes that far behind their heels, they're always going to have a bit of this as they create speed, as they push into the ground. Whereas on the other hand, if he were taller through the legs and got that big chest a little bit more there, created some space, now he can actually create some depth going back, which was something David wants him to do with the right foot, right? I take it with the right foot, he can create more depth. But from here, because he can create more depth and there's space available, he can then get his chest covering here without the handle raising. And his butt can push back wide because now his tailbone is only slightly behind the heels. He has space and he can work back into it. So he can have some torques with a handle exiting the chest opening from that position. That would be my take if I just saw him. That would be my 2-minute version there.
Yeah.
But to me, going back to old notes, if I was taking notes in my training with David with this player, the one word we would have for his address position is crowded, and the word we'd have for his impact position is stuck. So then, how do we, so that would be my initial take. His anatomy and the setup that he has there doesn't match.
You think that's a result of his club up?
It could be a number of things. So there could be other things in the mix, but to me it's crowded and then stuck in that order. So if we can correct the setup, the club fit, anything to get him in position where he feels like his chest and his arms, and it's funny, if you gave him the turf striker or a little soft ball between his chest, you'd all of a sudden go, wow, I've got to actually create some space here for that to plane and track and what have you. So
that's one of his drills for sure.
I would say,
what do you think there, guys?
no, good. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to know him, right? But there's no doubt that he, in my opinion, he doesn't really understand how much power he could create from his linebacker build, and he just hits it out there with his arms.
Yes.
So teaching him how to, that's why I was asking about a push. Like if you got him to just hit it 60 yards right, the only way he can hit a push is if he stops using his arms and he starts to figure out, okay, how am I going to use my legs? And yeah, I definitely would have given him a Bryson look at setup for sure with the handle. But I think he would have tried to do that if you just asked him to push it. It's really interesting to me though how good his legs were.
Yeah, he's got
It
great.
is freaking awesome.
He cleans up a lot of his narrowness and steepness
Yeah.
through his shift there with his pelvis, but you can see it's just so cramped.
Yeah.
So to me, posture with him,
Yeah.
posture, lie angle, all of those things have to be so spot on, and then you can start to attack the motion and get that impact looking, whatever the number ends up being, to Zach's point, where it's like, okay, his body, his hands and arms are so much more synced, hips are maybe, give or take, 25, 30 open, and this is, 15 or 20, and he feels like, well, I can hit shots from there, whether it's a little pull cut, or as you say, if he wants to just feel a little bit more closed and hit a little, push draw.
I would
The
just,
gravity fit would be amazing for him.
I would just say,
That lead shoulder goes
Go ahead.
so internal.
yeah, no, I mean, everybody said, I think there's 2 points to this one. I mean, I don't know the guy at all, but number one is the psychology of it, isn't it? I mean, you have my experience in full time, and you'll have a bit of pressure from the parents that they probably think he's better than he is, and you've got that environment there, which is never great, and it always leads to sort of trying to search for the one thing when it's not one thing.
Yeah.
And if you search for the one thing, you'll just end up 6 months from now, nothing will be different. So
So we're a little bit, so just not cutting, but we're a little behind the 8 ball then because it's like
yeah, you
junior,
have the data, right?
no junior golf scoreboard because he hasn't played enough events. So it's just like, right, well we need to get out and play.
Yeah.
And unfortunately again, the playing isn't matching what we said. So now it's like, well, do we completely change the route that we go with this?
It's going to be very important, that patient process, isn't it? It will be improved something, and you won't see a dramatic jump. You'll be still shooting 85s, and it'll become 82. It's going to be the route, isn't it? If there's a sort of a way there to try to satisfy the parents, or a semester coming up, it'll just get so messy. So it'll be the only way out of it is that step by step. My only take on it would be looking here is that does he just get too far past it too early, and that's he's almost starting to load here at L4.
Yeah.
And then does he get so far past it, the bottom of the swing's going to be over here, so then he has to sort of stall and bunch up to, if he got that better set up, and he basically got a little more behind it, and so his center matched where he was in the swing, would he be able to then keep moving through it?
Any thoughts?
But that would feel to him like, whoops,
Yeah.
I'm so far off it here.
Yeah, basically, I mean,
He's
I've done a bit of that as well, to be honest. It was like, obviously getting a bit more centered at address, just felt it was a bit too much right side there as well, and set up. And then I just asked them, like, the initial thing was just that. I said, well, I want you to spend a little more time feeling like you're staying on your right side a little bit more in this backswing before he transitions. But to say,
his left hip is so far past his left foot there, so out, isn't it?
And sometimes we get a student, right? You get a student setting up there, David, right? And they're in their best posture, and then you say, okay, give us an example of impact from there, and they go. And they feel that pressure, and it's almost like, oh, they can go there. Whereas with him, if you got him to do it initially, it'd be just feel, he'd have to push so far back into his heels to create. So, given his, as Zach said, his unique build, that he is, so strong through his thoracic and glutes, and he's so broad through that area, I think spacing would be a big word there to create, as we've all said, you can get after the motion there. That to me is where you can start to tackle the motion, the earliness, the lack of depth, and what have you. So,
do you think geometry-wise, because again with the bigger guys, from my experience, it is really hard for them to get shallow. So do you think geometry-wise can get him pretty shallow, even though he's that?
yeah, I think he would be. I think one of the terms we may use there, if you give them that spacing, almost that DeChambeau feel that Zach mentioned, you can almost be very, to me, he would be very monoplane because he's so strong. He's able to have that forearm rotate and feel it turn back down and cover. So I think his planes would look very mono, but created from space at address, as opposed to it looking, you know, like maybe more of a willowy player who has a little bit more.
Cool.
But I'm just thinking, you know, I think if, you know, having seen players like that and some of the things David's done with broader players, his spacing has been a big ticket item, especially at the bottom, given how crowded he looks.
Cool. Nice challenge.
Yeah.
This was the assessment though, right?
Yes.
What do we got now?
No. I actually don't. I was looking this morning to see if I had any revenue.
Because it's gonna change, right? Like I think that's the cool thing about this kid is he could just evolve. Like less is more with him for 9 months. Like if he's probably gonna change the golf swing a lot if you just change the environment, right? Like if you just had him go out there and stand on whatever that hole is 3 on Watson, right? The par 3, and say, hey, like it can't go left.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? You're gonna start this ball left and fade it in, or you're gonna try and draw it? Like I always wonder, because his grip isn't that bad to have that much face rotation.
Yeah, and the thing with me that
It's not wide open on the way down.
I mean, I'm thinking the setup, as Sean says, but for a kid that moves so well, I was really surprised to see such a poor position and impact.
Right.
That's the thing that, I mean, as I say, the address position for sure, but I still thought, like, it didn't make sense why he was so
So you give him a
close.
band? Have you given him a band to see how he pulls? Like just to see, like I wonder if he's a big guy and we're all like me being stereotypical, like saying like, oh, this kid's powerful, but he might be just a marshmallow. He might not know how to actually use it. Like if you asked him to like, if you pulled the band here and you said, come on, move me, is he just gonna go like this?
Yeah.
Or is he actually gonna, because if he learns that, then you say to him, okay, then you pace him into what Sean's saying and say, all right, well let's start here and then figure out how we actually push. And
Yeah.
I think once the shoulder opens up, he's gonna freaking be a great player.
Yeah, if you have that band, I dare say the athleticism he has, he's probably not going to start with the band here.
Yeah.
He's going to want to feel, okay, if he goes to say delivery, he's going to want to feel, okay, I want this left side involved. So I think you can get after the motion once you give him some idea. This is the way you're built. This is the way we need to create the spacing for you to actually get the body, hands and arms synced, get the plane better, because everything is so heely, but then he's got to go, you know, he's no depth and everything's got to work out to create space. And as Robin pointed out, that sort of early left buys him a little bit of time, but then he pays the ferryman back here. So it's a cocktail of athletic compensations to find the ball.
Yeah.
But I think, posture is posture, and then giving him some literacy to feeling how his body and left arm, to David's point, can then open. But I think that would be a big ticket item for a big ticket player. I mean, 125s, I mean, he's did that good, 125 miles an hour with his driver with that setup. So it just shows you.
In this environment, he's going to want to get better quickly. You want to get better quickly, his parents want to get better quickly, but you've got to go slowly. And that'll be the challenge.
Yeah.
Just got to go slowly. You know, he gets more comfortable with setup over a month. And, and you work on the other things which is being talked about here.
Yeah, I mean, the conversation will change now with the parents in regard to, okay, well, we need to probably discuss a gap year, because again, he does have high aspirations college-wise, and I think it is a matter of dialing him back now a little bit, doing a bit of this work to try obviously get his technique a bit better, that he's got obviously some ability to control that club face a bit more.
And I would say
if
to
you just go
this,
playing, we're just going to see, it's going to take a long time for him to get that score down, in my opinion.
I would say use this fall to really create his constance and get
Yeah.
the posture where you feel like he can do special things with his athleticism from a good posture. And then I think he'll start to find, as you say, that consistent shot shape. Because what you'd rather have here in this scenario is maybe having tried, figured out a few things, but then come into the spring and go, okay, the constants are set, we figured out your ABC and your setup and a couple of key drills, and then the spring he unloads and has some great performances. So you'd rather, in this case, he may end up finishing quite a bit stronger than he started and kind of swallowed a bit of his, scoring pride of late in tournaments elevated from a high school level. But yeah, that setup is so crowded. He's nowhere to go with his arms. He pushes into the ground, create energy, and it's just, wow, it's amazing. It just shows you how good he is to have hit it from there. There's just certain tolerances, isn't there, with geometry? When you look at it, again, if you go back there, if you go to address, why don't you go to address again? It's just certain tolerances. You look at that window. If you created a cone there, you might say, okay, hands and handle could be there, but look at where he is. Go to impact. Wow, that's impressive.
It's shanked the elbow,
I know where I hit from there. Full right.
yeah.
All day long. It is amazing because we have, as you know, I think for most of us, an everyday golfer from there is hustling that all day long. They're just not going to be able to, find it.
Is he close to him? Is his circle in the club face center, or is it?
Well, he's just got brand new clubs.
To go back to Grant's question, are they just stock and standard, or are they upright too?
Well, Tom fit him, so I don't know if he did a dynamic pick or because it would have been very upright otherwise. Tom presumed he did.
It's gonna be something you have to monitor. Is he?
Well, yeah, because they just look too flat for them.
Yeah, to your point, Grant, if you get the club, let's say the measurement of the club width, because I think a little bit of, the other thing is here, a little bit of Mike Adams here, where we do the wingspan and we clearly illustrate to him, look, you've got this big barrel chest, your wingspan is, 4 inches shorter than your height, so we need these up and the club coming to you so you can actually plane it, right? So, but you could do drills with them like a little Matthew Fitzpatrick drill. As long as the club fits spot on, he can go, okay, club flush, handle up. So now the club's giving him a measure there, and he attaches in, so he feels like, whoa, I've got all this space I can, go to rather than have to work out of.
Only 600.
Thanks, Dave.